So I'd like to call this meeting to order. Number 36 from the Board of Internal Economy. We have 8 items on the agenda. I hope that we'll be able to go quickly through them where possible. Number 1, minutes of the previous meeting. Have you all had an opportunity to read the minutes? Do we have consensus? Yes, thank you. Number 2, business arising from previous meeting. Ms. de Bellefeuille, do you have your hand up? No? No, that's fine.
I see a consensus for us to move on to item number 3. Interpretation resource update, le point sur les ressources d'interprétation.
Interpretation resource update. I'd like to invite Jean-François Limburner here, as well as his team, Madame Plouffe, Mr. Ball, and certain members of the administration, as well as Madame Cadieux. I know that colleagues have just received the speaking notes from Mr. Limburner. Jean-François, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge that we are gathered here on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. I'm pleased to be joined by Matthew Ball, Vice President of Services to Parliament and Interpretation, and Annie Plouffe, Acting Vice President for Special Initiatives at Parliament. I acknowledge our House Administration partners who are also here today. Honourable members of the Board of Internal Economy, thank you for inviting me here to provide an update. You asked me to address 2 topics in particular. First of all, remote simultaneous interpretation. The pilot project is ongoing, and we are continuing to cover 8 committee meetings per week, as we did this spring. The feedback from our interpreters and the committee members has been positive. We are working with the House Administration to prepare the next steps once the pilot is complete. You also asked me to provide an update on accreditation and on our idea of creating an entry-level accreditation for freelancers. We've taken note of your concerns and those of our partners regarding the matter. We are continuing our discussions as well as our consultations with our international counterparts who have developed different levels of accreditation depending on the degree of specialization. At our last appearance, we specified that this project would target only federal departments and not Parliament. One of the objectives is to give departments access to quality interpretation for various needs that we do not currently have the capacity to meet. Rest assured that only interpreters who have passed the accreditation exam are serving and will serve Parliament. The Translation Bureau's accreditation is recognized worldwide as a standard of excellence. But our exam is very difficult, and talented interpreters sometimes fail it. In the context of a global shortage, it would make no sense for us not to leverage their talent. While doing so, we could also coach them to help them become accredited. Without compromising on our requirements or the quality of our services, we'd like to continue investing in the professional development of future interpreters while thinking outside the box to strengthen our capacity.
Now to turn to another topic that is closely linked to the Bureau's interpretation capacity, interpreters' health and safety. In June, I told you that the number of incident reports had decreased from 128 in 2022 to 74 in 2023. The situation continues to improve. That's the good news. The 2024 figures look very encouraging. It's not over, I admit that, including a decrease in the incident leading to sick leave of our interpreter. Note that over the summer, we refined our figure using a management system to track all the incidents. The system is still quite new for us, but it will ultimately enable us to break down incidents even more precisely, according to the nature and the severity of them. And more importantly, we will be able to pinpoint the places and the circumstances where incidents occur so that we can adapt our protection measures. Et ce, pour l'ensemble de nos services.
This applies to all of our services, to Parliament, the House, the Senate, and outside.
This opportunity to thank you for supporting these measures. You have most likely noticed that they have continued improving, thanks in large part to the hard work of our partner of the House Administration. Together, we're constantly striving to optimize them, but also make them less restrictive for you. You may have remembered a lengthy warning that needed to be given at the start of each meeting in the spring, which we have made less burdensome now. We also ended the distancing between microphones in committee rooms since they were not proven to have any impact on the incident. And it was complicating your use of the room. We are now focusing on a new targeted measures, such as automatic reduction of the earpiece volume after question period, and the new awareness video that you might have seen already at the beginning of this session. We're also continuing our work with researchers to better understand the impact of sound on interpreters. Since spring 2020, we have obtained many studies on this topic and related issues. These studies guide our action, and we make a point of following their recommendation on an evidence-based matter. Mr. Chair, we know that there is no such thing as zero risk. You need only to look at the numbers of wire, microphone, earpiece, speaker, screen that we have currently in this room to understand that it is difficult to perfectly control the sound condition of meetings that are interpreted. Nevertheless, each incident is one too many, and we are committed to always doing better. Controlling the sound chain is a real team sport. Interpreters, technicians, and attendees, whether on-site or remotely, everyone has a role to play. And everyone benefits from ensuring that interpreter can work under the best possible condition. I said that in June, and I will say it again. For interpretation to be available, we need healthy interpreters. Quelques mots maintenant à propos de la relève.
And now a few words about future interpreters. We are continuing to work hard to tackle the shortage of interpreters that is a phenomenon worldwide and, of course, in Canada. I'm proud to highlight the tangible success announced by our minister on October the 25th. We've entered into a partnership with Laval University in Quebec City to create a micro-program in interpretation. Adding the University of Ottawa and York University, we are now helping 3 universities, including one in Quebec, to train tomorrow's interpreters. And we should be able to announce new programs by next fall. Through our efforts, interpretation is recognized as a profession of the future, and the number of institutions that teach it will soon no longer be a barrier to careers. But we still need students to fill classrooms. This is why we actively promote the interpretation profession on social media and beyond. We also look forward to soon launching, with Canadian Heritage, the interpretation scholarships announced in Budget 2024, so as to ensure the strategic capacity of Canada's government in interpretation. In addition to fostering future interpreters, we're leveraging technology to maximize our efficiency while relying on the skills and judgment of our professionals to ensure quality. As a center of language expertise, the Translation Bureau was tasked with establishing an artificial intelligence plan for the government as part of the budget. It includes analyzing the tools available on the market to support interpreters' work and language professionals in the Translation Bureau. I'll close by mentioning that this summer we met with the people responsible for interpretation at the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, the UN, and the European Space Agency. I will also add the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. These discussions have shown us that our efforts are consistent with practices abroad, and we are nothing short of what's done in other countries when it comes to interpretation. The Translation Bureau is an employer of choice for interpreters.
I hope I have given you a complete picture of the tangible progress that have taken place in recent months. I've been the CEO of the Translation Bureau for almost a year now, and I'm always extremely proud to talk about the incredible work of my colleagues. Whether it's for interpretation, translation, terminology in official languages, indigenous languages, foreign languages, and sign languages, the professionals at the Translation Bureau go above and beyond every day. I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their dedication, especially today, Isabelle, Cecilia, and Sharon in the back, but also all the people that are going to be helping and translating the minute of these meetings. Thank you, honorable members, for your attention to this pillar of our democracy. Linguistic Services. My colleagues and I are now happy to take your question. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Limburner. I have 2 people on the list. Now, let's begin with Mr. Julian. Thank you very much to you and your team. It's a fairly detailed report. I would say interpretation is not the pillar, it's the foundation of our democracy. It's the only place where we can have a unilingual member of parliament from BC meeting a unilingual member from Lac-Saint-Jean, and they can talk to each other. So it's really the very foundation of our democracy and our House of Commons system. Our interpreters do a huge job, and we thank them every day for the work that they do so that our democracy can function. I have several questions. I'll be asking them one after the other. First, you mentioned 8 committee meetings carried out by remote interpreters. I'd like to know how many interpreters are available remotely and how many are used in any given week. Second, you talked about the accreditation system. On that subject, I'd like to know how many interpreters are currently accredited and what you are forecasting for the next year and the next interpreting exams, when they will be taking place, and how many people you expect will go through the accreditation process. Because from what I've understood, the failure rate is quite high. So that's somewhat problematic when we see those figures. You mentioned Laval University, York, and Ottawa universities for accreditation programs. So how many spots does that actually give us starting in January and starting in September 2025? How many places will there be for students taking this first stage of the interpretation accreditation process? Last question. You raised health and security as an issue. I've raised this several times. Madame de Bellefeuille raises it frequently at every meeting as well. This is something which concerns us. You mentioned 128 incidents in 2022 and 74, if I've understood correctly, in 2023. You did not give us any figures, unless I'm mistaken, for 2024 to date. How many incidents have there been this year to date? Understanding, of course, that the year is not yet over. This completes my list of questions. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll try to answer the questions, and perhaps I'll turn to my colleagues for the figures. In terms of remote interpreting, for now, the limit is that it's a pilot project, as I've mentioned, so people interpret committee meetings that have been chosen by our colleagues. The distance is not what's at issue here. It could be close by or very far away. Obviously, in your questions, you have asked for the size of the interpreting pool, and that's not necessarily increasing because we're offering remote services. What we've determined in our conversations with other parliaments abroad is that this practice is becoming implemented, so it's very important for us to learn the lessons of others and to prepare ourselves for a time when we will need to increase the number of remote meetings. There are cases where people could be outside Ottawa. I understand. I'm going to preview your next question. These are people who may not want to travel. Most of our interpreters are here present in Ottawa, but you can have both cases. You could have interpreters who are in the Ottawa area who could offer remote services to support Parliament. The question is, how many? I'd ask Mr. Ball exactly how many are involved in the current pilot project of the 8 committees a week. Mr. Ball? With pleasure. Thank you, Chair. If I may, to answer the question, we have 10 suppliers providing current services. As we've mentioned, they cover 2 committees a day, so that's 8 committees a week. Since we began the remote project, since the first meeting on September 28th, 2023, there have been roughly 200 meetings with simultaneous interpretation provided remotely, or as we call it, in dispersed mode. So 10 suppliers. Thank you. In terms of accreditation, I'd like to elaborate on this with you. We have increased the number of exams. Now we have 2 exams a year, so we've increased the rate, the pace of exams, but the pool of interested people is not increasing in keeping with the doubling of the frequency of the exam. So this is a problem. Last spring, we had a very high failure rate. We had one person who passed in the spring. In the fall, we're still marking the exams. You followed with your question on university programs. I can give you some idea here, whether we're talking about Glendon, Ottawa, and soon Laval. Laval will have 10 to 15 students in the program, and they have to complete the program. They're not available in this January. So that's very good news. Laval University and we will try to bring students. Laval already offers translation courses, so there was a certain interest from people who were in translation. Some of those students were interested in interpreting. In addition, there are technology courses because technology is evolving very quickly in both areas. In Ottawa, we have fewer than 10, and in Glendon, it's even smaller. So in the Translation Bureau, I would say we have roughly 70 interpreters who are employees, and then we have roughly the same number of freelancers. So we have roughly 100 interpreters supporting all of the committees as we did in the spring session. So I am encouraged by the average age of interpreters who are civil servants. That average has dropped. So we have younger interpreters. And those who are nearing retirement age, well, more of them will be able to, more people will be able to join the civil service. I'm not saying, I don't know for freelancers what the age is for our contractors, but we know, I'm sure you'll see it yourself, several freelancers are former employees of the Translation Bureau. So we know that in the freelance pool and of a Bureau certified and accredited interpreters, this is a concern. We want to be able to maintain the required number of interpreters to support you. You've asked for the exact number of those accredited. I don't know if you mean at the Bureau or in Canada. Perhaps, Matthew, you could give us more details on the subject? If I may, Chair. In the last 2 years, the Bureau has accredited 22 new interpreters to serve in Parliament and the Canadian government. Most, given the rule, the Translation Bureau rules, we serve Parliament as a priority. So 25 new interpreters are here at Parliament every day. And you wanted figures. I'd like to share with you the fact that, well, the year is not over yet, of course, so we don't know what will happen between now and the end of the year, but there were 128 incidents in 2022, 74 in 2023, and to date in 2024, something like 32. That includes the 2 sessions. For the fall session, because measures were added this summer because there was different instructions from the Department of Labor this summer, which told us that we had to strengthen our measures. So now we're under 10, I think, for the fall. So that's up until October 31st or up until November 30th, up to today's date. We count them every day. We receive our reports at the end of every day. So when I said a system has been added, so we're looking for more, so we're finding more. So now we're going through all sound interruption service reports with a fine-tooth comb. They're not always related to health and safety, but it's an ability to understand, is there a problem with the room? Is it something with the participants? Is it the technology? Is it the new system? So we're beginning to be able to make the necessary correlations. So anytime service is interrupted, we pay attention. In some cases, it was simply that the microphone was non-compliant. But we do take note of these because it's important for interpreters to have proper sound to be able to interpret. Thank you. Thank you. Before moving on to Madame de Bellefeuille, I'm sure you've noted that the bells are ringing. There is a vote for 30 minutes. I hope that, as we did last week, if we can vote remotely, but this is up to the members. Let me know whether we should be formally interrupting this meeting or whether we can continue if people decide to vote remotely. Second question, Madame de Bellefeuille. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I have several questions. Chair, let me know if you want me to stop at any point if you want to deal with the voting issue. I don't mind voting remotely, personally, given this would seem to be our last meeting at the Board of Internal Economy for 2024. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the pilot project. Regarding the remote interpreting pilot project, you mentioned that comments received from the interpreters and members of the committees are positive. What is that based on? Do you have some sort of dashboard? Do you speak to members of the committees? How can you state that? What are you basing yourself on? Chair, that's a very good question. I could give you more detail. For example, we talked about acoustic incidents. In those committees, we have not seen any major incidents. In terms of the functioning, the comments that we've received are perhaps less positive are sometimes the quality of the sound or the volume of the sound, because interpreters are sometimes in two different places. So we're working on that. And then the way that interpreters can communicate amongst themselves, that's another issue. Right now, they're all in the same room, they're in the same booth, and they can see each other. This is something that's changing as well. Technology is changing, and remote interpreting is becoming more frequent across the globe. You've heard about the Larson effects audio feedback incidents that's often here in Canada, and we've learned about this when we talk about other countries. There are 10 other countries who have more than one official language, and in Canada, I don't have the headset, so I hear myself. We have speakers in the room, whereas in other kinds of parliaments, everybody has to wear a headset. So that limits feedback incidents. Most of our health and safety incidents are when we're in an area which is supported by both microphones and speakers. That's removed if you have a remote interpreter. There is no audio feedback effect. You could have sound quality problems. We do hear that. But in terms of committees, there have been no interruptions, the work didn't have to stop, or no major problems were reported to me. Matthew, would you like to add anything? Mr. Ball, would you like to add anything? Have you heard anything else? If I may, Chair. When it comes to interpreting, we are interested in the feedback that our freelancers providing the service are giving us. We have not heard any complaints from them, and we work with them to ensure that the service is going appropriately. We ask them for their feedback, and for them, it seems to work. We are interested in the points of view of the clients, of course, so we are always interested to hear your impressions on the quality of the service. Now, there is a technological aspect to all of this. And on those matters, we depend greatly on the expertise of our House administration colleagues. But our interest is first and foremost interpretation and service and its quality. Chair? In your presentation, you mentioned that members of committees had positive reactions. Let's be clear. 80% of interventions in committee or in the House, we've documented this over 3 years, take place in English. So 80% of what's said is in English. Witnesses tend to be 80% English speaking. So the interpreters are interpreting for the 33 Bloc MPs and the Francophone MPs of the other parties. We are in a position to give you quite specific feedback because we are the major users of interpreters, because few witnesses testify in French, and few of us express ourselves only in French here. My question was, how have you documented your pilot project? What kind of indicators are you using for quality so as to conclude that the members of the committees have positive feedback? Perhaps I could turn to my colleague who has pilot project data. We support our House colleagues. The 8 committee per week limit is because it's a pilot project. We don't want to go too far beyond that. We want to learn, so we're still in the pilot mode. When I talk about feedback, I see all the incidents that occur in the House, and I'm very interested in seeing what's happening in terms of the remote interpreting. To my knowledge, and I'll give you an example, at the beginning, and things are improving. At the beginning, sometimes there's a lag when there's remote interpreting. So you'll hear members saying, there's a lag that I don't have when I'm here on site. So we've heard that comment, but I've also seen the team working very hard to reduce that lag. And we have good results there.
Monsieur le Président, Madame de Bellefeuille, comme vous savez, on travaille d'arrache-pied pour travailler sur des solutions technologiques. Dans le projet pilote, ça a été une aventure.
We're working very hard on technological solutions. It's a bit of an adventure given the changes in the use of this kind of service to support the capacity of the Bureau. The feedback that we've received focuses more on the time lags, and now we found a solution in technology. You'll see that, well, now we have 2 rooms that are configured for remote interpreting. We will have more available when we come back in February. So we've addressed the technological challenges. So most of the feedback that we were receiving from members of Parliament was about the actual experience in committee supported by a remote interpreter. In the last 2 years, that's what we had. We worked with our colleagues at Procedures, and we talked about the feedback received either from ambassadors or with clerks of committees or interpreters or MPs directly, as was the case a few months ago when Ms. Finley gave me feedback here during the BOIE meeting. These are the metrics that we've been informally tracking, as well as the dashboard that you're familiar with. Perhaps I could give you some feedback then. What we find difficult with simultaneous interpretation is that sometimes when interpreters are present on site and there's a change in interpreter, they see each other and they can cue each other to say, okay, it's your turn. But when they're remote, they're not in the same house. And what we experience is that sometimes we think maybe they're not giving a cue between themselves. The interpretation is stopped and we have to tell the chair we're not hearing any interpreting. And we're wondering what the process is to hand over from one interpreter to the next. How is it done when you're interpreting remotely? Our sensation is that the coordination and the signals for when to change interpreters is not always as fluid as could be. Has that comment been made to you in the past, Mr. Limburner? Yes, of course. And when we've spoken to universities, I was asking about how things are taught as well, because this is something that has to also be done during the teaching. So I asked the question about what's being done now. I've seen different models in other parliaments. We're talking about systems that are improving and that are dedicated to remote simultaneous translation with technological tools. I'm moving out of my wheelhouse, so I'll turn over to Mr. Dicker, because there are ways for interpreters to hand over to each other, even if they don't see each other. Yes? Because we're experiencing it. And, put yourself in the shoes of a unilingual francophone MP. Basically, there's a total shutdown. And if the MP does not raise that subject, no clerk or chair of the meeting realizes that this is happening, because most of people are working in their mother tongue, which is English. So in your pilot project, this is something that should be documented more, because we are experiencing this quite frequently, that weakness of the simultaneous interpretation service. And it hinders our ability to intervene and debate in committee because the interpretation stops. And also, the burden of reporting it is always on the shoulders of the francophones around the table, because nobody else is noticing it except the users, and we're a minority. So it becomes somewhat burdensome. So I understand that you're going to be documenting this now. Now, you said that this pilot project has been in place for some time now. You said we're analyzing the lessons learned. So what lessons have you learned from the pilot project? Well, I mentioned them in my opening comments. First of all, it works. I'm taking note of the feedback received today, and if my colleagues want to add anything. Well, this increases the possibilities. We've seen shorter or longer interruptions, whether here or elsewhere when there were sound issues. Knowing that this is one way of providing a service, perhaps there's a way of offering this service as a support when we can't offer the service on site. We've seen that it works, so this could be a plan B should there be some sort of interruption. We have a team ready to come and take over from interpreters if anything happens. We've seen this in the past. It takes a few minutes to have them move physically. So we're able to offer the service without having to be physically present here in booths. My colleague will tell your committee about the renovations in Parliament later. So that gives us a lot of information about the way of working without having to be physically present in the room. We see that it exists here, in other countries, in other parliaments, so we're really learning. You mentioned ways of communicating. We've heard this. There are tools that make it possible for them to communicate with each other almost in real time. Through the chair, Madame de Bellefeuille, there are three major elements to remote interpreting. There is technology, operational processes, the handoff that's not going well, or an interpreter who doesn't turn on their mic after the transfer. There are operational processes that play an important role. And then there's the actual interpreter. The system needs interpreters, quality interpreters, to ensure that interpretation is done so as to meet Parliament's needs. So those are three major issues. Provide a service remotely and have it be a quality service for MPs. Chair, it's rare for us to have such a lovely visit. I'd like to take advantage of it, but I don't want to go on for too long. If anyone else has any questions, perhaps I could take over in next round, but if anyone doesn't, then I'm happy to continue. Madame de Bellefeuille, nobody else has indicated a wish to ask any questions on this subject. But if I may add a word here, I believe that Madame de Bellefeuille's feedback regarding handoff between interpreters working remotely is very important, because I wasn't aware that this was why people have said that there was no more interpreting coming through. So if there is a way to make a clearer signal and transparency for handoffs, this would facilitate people's lives, because people don't want to have to be in a situation where they believe that the system has broken down. So I think that's a good suggestion. Ms. de Bellefeuille, please continue. Thank you. I hope my colleagues don't find that I'm going on for too long with all of my questions. My next questions are about your other pilot project for entry-level accreditation of freelancers. Mr. Limburner, I've understood that you haven't started with this. You're still thinking about it. You haven't really began this project. Is there any time frame for this project? Do you think you're going to be starting this soon? And depending on your answers, I may have other questions. Chair, that's a very good question. The project hadn't begun last time I appeared before you in the spring. The entry-level accreditation for freelancers project is one thing, but we're dealing with highly limited capacity here. We're working on several different areas at the same time. I talked about increasing the pool of students, but that takes a certain amount of time. You have to bring in new students who will then be able to graduate and come to the Bureau. In terms of the interpreters who are employees, we have similar programs. The difference between interpreters who are employees of the Translation Bureau is that when they join the Bureau, they don't become accredited interpreters overnight. The professors that I've met with have told me the same thing. Mr. Limburner, the Translation Bureau is Everest. They know that their own students, they advise their own students to go get experience in less complex situations. So we have a way of supporting our employees. When it comes to freelancers, we are looking at that as another avenue, perhaps to increase capacity. I don't want to go overboard, but has this program begun or not? No, it has not, because you said that you're thinking about it. No, it has not begun. We are continuing our discussions, but to discuss this, we have to work with partners, interpreters. I've met associations, the Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick associations dealing with interpreters to have their feedback. And as I mentioned, in my opening remarks, there are other countries who already have this, but we have not yet begun the project. We are looking into it and we're analyzing it. We considered the feedback of this committee. It's been very useful for us. So I understand that the pilot project has not yet begun and you're thinking about how you would proceed. One of my concerns is that we know that your strategy is valid. Perhaps there are students who fail but who are very close to passing the exam, and we try to give them experience so that they can then take the accreditation exam again. You also mentioned that these students will be given the necessary support with perhaps a more experienced peer to help them pass the exam. Here's my concern. It seems to me that you don't have enough interpreters so that an interpreter can stop interpreting in order to go and accompany a younger interpreter who hasn't passed their exam. So I'm a little concerned if they don't have that support, maybe they won't have as much likelihood of passing the exam. And if you can get that support, you'll be withdrawing resources, and we actually need those resources because you're not in a surplus situation when it comes to the total number of interpreters that you have to support us. So that's my concern. So how do you intend to manage that support? Perhaps you could answer me once you start the pilot project. Maybe it would be simpler for you to answer at that time because you're still thinking about it.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I can say is that this phenomenon also applies to the many different ways we try to increase the pool of interpreters. In universities, well, I talked about a scholarship program with Heritage Canada that was announced in the previous budget. Well, we're offering instruction, teaching. Our interpreters are teaching in Ottawa, namely here, in order to help. So it has the same effect for that pilot project with freelancers. That's what we experience daily. We have technological support. We can provide booths for students to practice in, for instance. And as I said in my opening remarks, well, at Parliament, we only have accredited interpreters, and that's what we want to continue to do. But services are in demand. The demand is increasing everywhere, and it's the same around the world. It's the same for sign languages. It's the same for sign language interpreters. So do you need to have the same skills in a meeting with a few people outside Parliament? Maybe not, and that's where we could provide an opportunity for experience for interpreters who are not yet accredited for Parliament. I have a question, Mr. Chair. Well, there were 2 instances over the last year where MPs started to talk very loudly around the table all at once, around the committee table, and the interpreters kept telling us that they could no longer continue interpreting because it was too chaotic. And I'm not talking about something that lasted for 5 minutes. It lasted for maybe 90 minutes or more, and it was impossible for them to do their work. And I think Mr. Ball said that the normal reflex for an interpreter is to continue interpreting. So they wouldn't spontaneously or quickly say that they can't continue. They might put their health and safety at risk before interrupting service because it's in their nature. Could you tell us whether you've been informed on that situation and what that can mean for interpreters when everyone is shouting point of order around the table nonstop for about 60 minutes? What does that mean for interpreters' ears? And what happens if interpreters did not receive the instruction to stop interpreting? As a whip, I did go to a booth to tell interpreters, listen, as the only Francophone around the table, I am letting you know you can stop working. So I would like to hear Madame Cadieux, about procedure. How can this happen? I am under the impression that it was me as a whip who was able to tell interpreters to stop because no one had that capacity. I would like to know if you looked into this because this could happen again. And if everyone around the table representing all caucuses of all parties hear what you have to say about it, then maybe we would have, we would be encouraged to not behave in that way. It's a human behavior. It has nothing to do with technology or the use of devices. It's the way people behave that is responsible for that. So I'd like to hear you about that and its consequences. And Madame Cadieux, how can we deal with that if we want to protect our interpreters? Great question, Mr. Chair.
Les télés sont ouvertes, on regarde.
We are always monitoring what's happening, and when there's an incident, I listen to it afterwards. And I spoke about this a bit earlier today. We have a system to analyze what's happening. And we are looking into this and into committees where there are more problems. You're also right when you said that you can hear about this, you can listen to the interpreters, they're always offering a service, and you expect them to interpret. And if you look at the room, they're outside of the room. It's not always obvious, but I've seen that in some cases, an MP will say the interpreter is signaling that he or she can no longer interpret. This happens sometimes. And I think I will ask Madame Cadieux to explain this further, but we also do have a system with a chat and a technical team, and they can signal issues when there are issues. And on my side as well, I don't think that it should only rest on the interpreter's shoulders to explain this. If there's a problem, the interpreter can signal it. Every room is different. It's not configured in the same way, so I will now give the floor to Madame Cadieux, and she will talk to us about the process. Through you, Mr. Chair. When you're in a committee, there is a procedure. There are also processes in place. As you all know, when you chair a committee, there is a procedure to be followed. You can suspend the meeting or do something else. But now if we talk about the partners in the room and the interpreters, there is also a lot of work that is being done. There's a protocol that has been established and that has been adjusted in the last year. And there are also technical services, supporting services that are there. So we all work together in this process. And in this case, in the case that you were talking about, the clerks had talked about this with the interpreters, and they had told the interpreters if they felt that this was a danger, a health and safety danger, they could stop interpreting. So we're all working together, and if you look at what's happening in committees and the services that support committees, there's a lot of communication that is going on in the background. And as Mr. Limburger said, there's a chat, there are services in the room, so the communication is very clear. We are communicating with interpreters. It's not exactly the same thing as a procedure that's to be followed in committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madame Cadieux. I think we're going to have to establish things much more clearly with the chair. An interpreter can say that he or she can interpret, but if the microphone is still open and the filibuster is going on and interpretation is impossible, there's also a question of privilege. So I felt in the last situations that I witnessed, I was very, very worried about the health and safety of our interpreters. There was an incident that happened last year, but there was also a more recent incident at the Justice Committee. So I think that the procedure team and Mr. Limburger should work together to find a solution. If interpreters can no longer interpret because it is dangerous to their health and safety, the chair must suspend the meeting immediately and also turn off the mics of the offenders and of the people who are not who are detrimental to the privilege of MPs who want to talk. So I hope that today we will be able to improve things in order to let our interpreters know that we are really, really taking their health and safety to heart. And now I have one last question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Limburger, you told us that you received funds in order to establish an AI fund and to create tools. So could you please talk to me about this program? How will you be using AI in order to help or assist interpreters in their work? Answer: I have not received any fund for this. No funding has been received, so I just wanted to clarify that. But since 1977, we are already using AI, and this has been the case for years. But as you've heard, we're talking now about improving AI, and our translators are already using this system. You probably use Google Translate or ChatGPT daily. At the Translation Bureau, we are very well equipped with this as well, with AI. Now, regarding interpreters, AI is happening, and if you listen to, if you watch TV, you probably see that subtitling is improving constantly. So in certain cases, we could use subtitling to help interpreters. And when interpreters prepare themselves before a meeting, well, they can also now use AI. If you look at my speech, they would be able to read the speech faster, or AI could help them in preparing the speech. In certain cases, and we will be talking about this because it is currently happening in some parliaments, some of the announcements are interpreted or translated by AI. So we are keeping up with this. We're looking at what's happening. You can receive information that will be translated, for example, on your phone. And I think that we have to ensure that people will be supported by this AI. AI will be giving them superpowers in a certain way. And regarding conference interpreters, you must understand that, as I said in the beginning of the meeting, we need to have a strategic capacity of interpreters that will always be there to interpret, even if AI is improving. We're all using more and more of this technology, and we really want to stay relevant. I hope that this answers your question. Thank you very much, and I would like to thank you for having answered these very important questions. I think there are two things that are important.
One of them is for the Interpretation Bureau. The other one, I believe, is for us around the table. I think it's important, given what Madame de Bellefeuille raised in terms of if there are interventions, which there is people speaking over each other at committee, and how difficult that makes it and endanger that process for our interpreters. I'm wondering, colleagues, if this is a matter which should be raised at the liaison committee, so that members understand that when they engage in such tactics, that would have a physical harm on our interpreters, as well as Madame de Bellefeuille pointed out, could also pose a question of privilege to members who rely on these services to understand what is being said and what is going on. It comes right back down to the importance, again, of one person speaking at a time and exercising restraint in order to be able to ensure that everyone participates fully in all of this. The second issue, and Mr. Julian, I'll recognize you afterwards. Deuxième chose qui soulève.
The second issue is the following. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Limburger, and I would like to thank your team. I've seen that things are going in the right direction. And I had another question. I had asked this question last spring. I would like to talk about the 6 hours of interpretation per day. When will we be able to return to 6 hours per day? This will increase our capacity. It will increase our capacity, and we'll be able to offer more interpretation services to our members, because now we are limiting the service that we can give our members. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So going from 4 to 6 hours, this is tied to a hybrid setting. If we look at what's happening today in the room, we're all here in person. So there are many conditions that have an impact on the hours of interpretation services that are given in a day. It depends on the difficulty of the interpretation meeting. It depends on many things. But the first and foremost reason why we decided to go to 4 hours are linked to health and safety issues. The Bureau is still under an instruction that has been given. A directive has been given to the Bureau, and progress has been accomplished, but you will see that we might be able to close the directive, and we might be able to take a decision regarding the number of hours of interpretation that are given. We have been able to meet all of the demands during this session, and we are doing this while respecting the health and safety of interpreters. So I won't enter into too many details. It depends on how many people are online. So we won't necessarily go from 4 to 6 hours, jump from 4 to 6 hours from one day to the next. It will depend on the functioning of committees. If you look at what's happening in the Senate, most people in the Senate are there in person. So we are hoping that we will be able to increase the number of hours. In other committees, there are a lot of people that are online.
So we have to be more specific there to implement all of our measures. Benoit, did you want to add anything? From that answer, you could imagine that I'll be asking the question again in a future meeting. But it seems to me that you're opening the door to saying that there's not one single solution, but perhaps a case-by-case solution. And perhaps I'll come back to that at another time. Mr. Julian. Apologies, I was trying to vote. You suggested raising this at the liaison committee, writing to them about Madame de Bellefeuille's very pertinent question. I think it would also be important to send this to all chairs of all committees, because it does happen frequently and it's not acceptable. In the House, we're having, this is being dealt with better, and I'm very relieved at the reduction in the number of incidents that are occurring. But to remind committee chairs to ensure that this doesn't happen at committee, I think this is an important point. Absolutely. And to be clear, I didn't want us to write to the liaison committee, but that we raise that question at the next meeting of the liaison committee. I see that some of us, do we still have time to vote? It's already done. Very well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Limburner, Ms. Plouffe, Mr. Ball, Ms. Cadieux. Happy birthday. We'll now move on to item 4, proposed 2025-2026 main estimates.
The 2025-26 main estimates, item number 4. On va commencer avec Monsieur.
So we'll begin with Mr. Saint-Georges, who will be accompanied by Madame Côté.
Monsieur Saint-Georges.
Mr. Saint-Georges, you have the floor. I'm presenting the House of Commons proposed 2025-2026 main estimates for approval. Total budget, $777.9 million. Includes $656.5 million for the main estimates, as well as $121.4 million for services received at no charge. This is a total increase of $32.8 million, or 5.3% over the preceding year. This increase is largely attributable to board-approved initiatives totaling $13.2 million, or 2.1% of the total budget. Examples of these initiatives would be security support, electoral district redistribution, and technology lifecycle. Details are indicated on page 2 of the submission.
Total cost of living and inflationary increases account for $11.6 million, or 1.9% of the total budget, and mainly includes increases in members and House officer budgets and salaries, as well as economic increases for various administration groups. Other items increased by $8.1 million, or 1.3% of total budget, for employee benefit plans and adjustments to pension plans. Mr. Speaker, this concludes my presentation. Welcome any questions the board may have.
Questions? Yeah, Mr. Scheer.
Thanks very much for the presentation. I just had a question. It's on page 15 in my briefing book, Appendix F. At the bottom it says Office of the Clerk and Secretariat, Corporate Communications, 33 FTEs. And I just noticed last year there were 26 in corporate communications. And that seems like a pretty substantial increase. I was just wondering if you could speak to what is corporate communications and why does it need 33 FTEs?
I'm going to invite Natasha Flanagan to speak to this issue.
Bonjour, merci pour la question. Thank you for the
question.
Communications offers services in terms of informing the House administration and members of various matters. We also have the website, internal websites, external websites. We also manage through the Speaker's office, supporting the Speaker's office in terms of media requests, social media as well, and yeah, I think that covers it.
So the Speaker's office does also have a Director of Communications, is that true? So the Speaker's office has a communications person, at least, if not more, that supports Speaker?
We support the Speaker's office in terms of, yes, they are the main link to the media, for example.
Okay.
So we would provide them with support in terms of providing that information to the media.
So is there anything
which has been the case, I understand, for a significant amount of time.
Was there any, what's changed between last year and this year that you need 7 more FTEs to deal with corporate communications?
That's a good question.
In part, just to go back to your earlier question, the Speaker's office receives all media requests, and then from there, they're shipped out, farmed out to the House administration through our corporate communications team, so the head of corporate comms. They then compile information that then is sent back to the journalists through the Speaker's office. There has been a significant increase in demand from both the Speaker's office, from journalists. Perhaps it's related to the fact that it's a minority parliament. I don't know what exactly, but there's been an increase in demand for the services of corporate communications, both to serve the Speaker's office, but also internally to serve the House administration and the members.
So corporate communications are like internal memos, you know, please be aware this maintenance is going on, or, you know, change in policy, or...
That's part of it, but there's also a large component that's external looking. So again, all the social media that goes out, so there's an account for committees, there's an account for the House, there's an account for the Speaker, there's an account for parliamentary diplomacy. All the information that's provided through those accounts is generated, prepared by the corporate communications team. So yes, you're right. Part of corporate comms is internal looking within the House administration, but there's a large component, I don't know exactly the breakdown in terms of how many people work on what, but a large component of the workforce within corporate communications is working on information that goes outside.
So we say things like committees with social media accounts is that new this year, that they've only started this year? They need...
No, you're right, Mr. Scheer. We've had social media accounts for some time. Again, it's more the increase in demand for information to go out. We've even had, it's no secret, we've had some chairs that think that each and every committee should have its own Twitter or X handle. And we've tried to say, well, that would take a significant increase in resources over and above what we already have. So that's why we just have the one account for all committees.
Still seems like an awful big increase.
It's a fair point. What we can maybe do is we can obtain some more details for you and provide that to yourself and the board members, exactly what and when this increase came in.
Okay. The other question I have is, it says the press gallery secretariat. So there's 14 people that the House of Commons administration, i.e. taxpayers, pay for support to the press gallery.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's right.
Now, the news outlets themselves, the private corporations that run the various entities that would occupy the press gallery, so they don't pay for those FTEs. That's the taxpayer that pays for those FTEs.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. These are House employees who are there to assist. I would say it goes both ways. If there's a scrum or something, it's as much to the benefit of the journalists as it is to the members who are being scrummed or doing a press conference to have these interviews, etc., run smoothly and according to the guidelines that have been established by the parliamentary press gallery and the House, etc.
And that's in addition to the space that they're given. They're given physical office space that they don't pay for either.
I don't know the details on that, but yes, there is space provided to them. But I don't know what we can get those details for you as well.
Okay. So in addition to corporate communications, there's 14 staff that assist the parliamentary press gallery. Yeah. I don't know if the comms departments and officially recognized parties have that many people, and they do a heck of a lot more on social media and get way more media requests. That seems like a very, very large department.
It's a fair point. Again, I think we can get you some details in terms of what exactly all these people are doing and when the increases have come about. But they're a busy group. I take your point about obviously the comms people in parties would be extremely busy as well, but these employees are a busy group. Yeah.
Madam Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just following on Mr. Scheer's point, I think there is an inherent value in Parliament being able to communicate with Canadians. I mean, this is the People's House, and I think there's an important role to be played to ensure that that information is getting out to Canadians. Obviously, members of Parliament have a role to play there, but I think when it comes to the Parliamentary Press Gallery, this is something that is extraordinarily important for Canadians, and I think, enabling the press to have access and smooth operations on the Hill is something that has an inherent value to our democracy. And so I would say that I think this is something that we need to continue to support. Canadians, need to have that access to the goings about of what is happening on the Hill. And I'm a little concerned by Mr. Scheer's questioning here, because I think we need to ensure that the press in Canada continue to have access to Parliament Hill, that they are able to conduct scrums and interviews here on the Hill outside of the House of Commons. And I, would be curious to hear, the reasoning behind the increase in the Communications Department, but I can understand that as the landscape changes and as access to media outlets and information changes, the nature of the Communications Department would likely change as well. And so I think that's an interesting thing to come back to us on. But I can understand, as we go more digital, as there is a greater variety of outlets and medium in terms of how information is shared and Canadians access that information, as to why this is something that is important for Canadians to be able to have continued access to their democracy.
Thank you, Madam Gould. Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a nonpartisan Board of Internal Economy. We leave our partisan hat at the door when we come in here. I have to say I absolutely agree with the principle that we need to be providing communication so that Canadians can access the work of members of Parliament. I mean, they pay our salaries. They need to know what kind of work we're doing, and they need to have access to those vital nonpartisan tools that come through the House administration. Each political party may agree or disagree, but the principle of nonpartisan information has to be a hallmark of democracy. And I would suggest as well, when in so many parts of the world, and even in North America, journalism is under attack, that independent journalists who provide, again, that nonpartisan information, the Canadian public, their role needs to be reinforced, not attacked. It is sadly attacked far too often. And instead, we're seeing highly partisan vehicles that are designed to push propaganda rather than provide information. The role of independent journalists who represent us in the broadcast news and in the print media online, their role needs to be enhanced. And so I have no difficulty at all with ensuring both that independent information is available through the House of Commons for all Canadians, and that the role of independent journalists, impartial journalists, who hear the debate from all sides and then make a decision about how to report on that. That's the very essence of democracy. And I wouldn't want to see in any way the ability of journalists to access Parliament Hill and the ability of Canadians to access information to be impeded.
Merci, Monsieur Julien. Madame de Bellefeuille.
Thank you, Madame de Bellefeuille. All questions are relevant when we want to look at where spending is going to be allocated. I would recommend the approval of this budget. I am eager to get to item 5, where we're going to talk about the strategic internal assessment of operations. I think that Mr. Scheer may have answers to his questions at that point, because the budget is being approved for the next year, but the Board of Internal Economy is going to begin a strategic procedural review to be able to name services and identify what they cost, whether they're still relevant. I think that we will be able to see what needs to be readjusted for 2026, 2027. And I think that's a very responsible approach, Chair. So I would move that we approve the 25-26 estimates and that we begin the strategic internal assessment of operations process so that we can truly assess what is being done and whether it remains relevant and whether it should be maintained, increased, reduced. And at that point, we could be having this conversation, but under item 5. So I would move adoption of the estimates. Thank you. Mr. Scheer.
Yeah, the point I was making about corporate communications was not that there should not be corporate communications or informing Canadians what's going on. I was just asking people to think all the way back in that different time of last year. And I certainly didn't think that there was a lack of corporate communications. I know the House of Commons has a Twitter account that lets me know when the House is adjourned and lets me know when members moved an amendment, and I think that's wonderful. It's a very large increase for something that I haven't seen a massive change that would warrant that. And just making the point that in addition to that, there is the taxpayer-funded effective subsidy for corporate media entities that operate on the Hill. So I think if I understand Madame de Bellefoy's suggestion, is that she's proposing that we approve the budgets now and get into a more granular review as part of the strategic operation when maybe members of the board can go through more line items with a bit more information. And if that's the proposal, then I think I can support that, and then we can have a more holistic approach through various aspects of House administration.
Alors, je vois qu'il y a des tâchements de...
Well, people seem to be nodding in favor, so I imagine that we can approve these main estimates for this year. All in favor? Yes. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 5 with Mr. Saint-Georges, but we'll begin with a few words from Mr. Jantz. Mr. Jantz, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. We're presenting this topic today in response to questions previously asked by the board regarding House administration strategies to limit spending.
Administration has proactively been looking at its operations with a focus on strong stewardship, efficiencies, and sustainable resource management. We continuously strive to meet our strategic priorities and our service goals and to provide members and their staff with simplified, customized, and quality services. Mindful of the economic climate, through our commitment to the prudent stewardship of public funds, we're also making a dedicated effort to control growth by identifying efficiencies in all areas. This has been a top priority for me since becoming clerk, as well as for my senior executive team, the Clerks Managed Group, or CMG. The House administration is achieving this work in part through a comprehensive strategic and operational planning process, stemming directly from our strategic plan. All teams are working diligently to assess their services, costs, priority projects, and key priorities in support of excellence in members' services. Lower priority or non-urgent initiatives may be deferred or scaled down to stay within budget, thereby allowing us to redirect resources towards high priority and high impact projects, for instance, election readiness. Nous proposons également de prolonger notre plan stratégique.
We also propose to extend our strategic plan by a year so as to have additional time to advance and complete the main initiatives of the organization and ensure that we obtain the best possible results. I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank my Clerks Management Group colleagues and, in fact, all House administration employees who are constantly looking for ways of providing service more efficiently without impacting services to the members of Parliament. This being said, I'd now like to turn the floor over to Paul, who is going to present the strategic internal assessment of operations developed to continue this work and which will enable us to meet the financial pressures of today and into the future. Thank you. Paul.
We also appreciate the board's unwavering commitment to strong stewardship, which is key to the success of our growth management strategy. Comme l'a indiqué le greffier,
as the clerk mentioned, we remain focused on achieving our objectives by limiting the growth in staff. Full-time equivalents, which account for the use of resources, have increased by only 1.6% since 2018. This demonstrates our commitment to prudent resource management. The increased FTEs and budgets directly attributable is caused by the submissions that were approved by the board and are offset by efficiencies in operations.
Dedicated to the administration, of which 76% is primarily allocated to directly support members. As we progress on the initiatives within the Strategic Internal Assessment of Operations, or as we refer to as the SIAO, We remain committed to consulting with board members on any service level impact. This collaborative approach ensures that we maintain the high standard of support members rely on. The administration proactively began developing the SIO framework in response to the economic climate and its ongoing commitment to maintain prudent stewardship of public funds. The SIO framework is a multi-year plan currently focusing on the administration. It was developed through a consultative approach between the clerk and the senior leadership. Extending this to the members' budgets would require a mandate from the board along with consultations with its members. The framework has 4 pillars, the first being governance, then stewardship, operational efficiencies, and finally risk profile. Within each pillar are targeted initiatives aimed at improving efficiencies and driving down costs. And to do this, we are building a robust decision support system to have the information for those discussions. Some of these initiatives are well underway, and some examples of these activities are the development of a service catalog, including full costing, key performance indicators, dashboards, and benchmarking. Also performing a governance and structural review to align resources with priorities, as well as several continuous improvement projects to drive efficiencies. We are seeking the board's endorsement of our pathway forward, which we believe will achieve cost reductions through efficiencies while maintaining high-quality service delivery to members. We're also seeking approval of our proposal that the administration work with members of the board to establish a plan to engage and report on the SIO activities. Lastly, we are seeking the board's approval for a 1-year extension to the House's strategic plan from March 31st, 2026 to March 31st, 2027. This would allow the administration to make noteworthy progress on key corporate initiatives and ensure it has capacity to deliver on the SIO. Mr. Speaker, this concludes my presentation, and we welcome any questions.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Georges.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Jacques. Thank you, Mr. Saint-Jacques. Any comments? Madame de Bellefeuille. Well, I am very enthusiastic about the exercises that the clerk and his team are referring to, because I think it's always a good idea to review what you do and how you're doing it and what it's costing and whether it remains relevant and efficient. I think that it's a good presentation, and I approve the process. And your 4 pillars are something that I like as well, because we can see how the services to members are going to be assessed and how we'll be measuring them. I think this is a very good idea, and I think it's responsible, so I'd like to congratulate you. This is not going to be easy to do. It's not what the House is used to doing, if I could express myself in this way. I think that the Board of Internal Economy's members should be more closely connected to this. Perhaps you could create a working group with some members of the BOIE so that you could work on this, to having some reactions from the field, if you will. What do you think of that? Mr. Jeans, thank you for your comments, first of all, and thank you for the suggestion. I think it's an option that we had debated amongst ourselves, whether it would be an idea to have perhaps a subcommittee of the Board of Internal Economy to facilitate this kind of conversation between administration and the board. We think it would be an excellent way of proceeding. Chair, if members agree, we could perhaps have 1 member from each caucus or something like that, so as to look at increasing certain services or understanding certain concepts, so that when you appear before the board, we're not starting for zero, and we could perhaps even consult our caucus members. If you agree, I would approve this process, and I would include in the recommendations the creation of a subcommittee of the BOIE. Thank you for that proposal. Are our colleagues in favor of this? I see people nodding yes, no nays. Approved. Any other questions or comments regarding this strategic exercise? No? Can we adopt the recommendations as proposed and approve the process, first of all? Well, as we've just done, okay, and to approve the extension for another year. Okay, great, bravo.
To the next item, it might be just a good time. And thank you, Madame de Bellefeuille, for your comments. One of the comments which I would also like to share with members is in regard to, you might have noticed the new construction of the awning outside of West Block. I'd like to take an opportunity while the folks are here from the administration to thank them for bringing that entranceway to reality in a short period of time in an innovative way. And I've heard comments from members all that have really appreciated to have that new entryway, as well as j'aimerais aussi
on behalf of the people who protect us, I'd like to extend thanks. I know the fact of having that new structure, when it snows, as is the case today, or when we have inclement weather, it's nice to have that structure. I'd also like to point out the contribution of PSPC in so quickly approving this process and having this done in an innovative and efficient way, and not a costly way. So bravo to everybody for your contributions to all of this. And I'd like to say this on behalf of all members of the Board of Internal Economy. Moving on to item 6. I'd like to call Mr. Guillaume Laperrière.
For decision, but it's more of an information item and a report. Monsieur Laperrière, je m'excuse.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, membre de la Région.
Thank you, Chair and members.
The 2024 Progress Report on the implementation of the House Accessibility Plan. The report is our second progress report and was prepared in accordance with the Accessibility Act. It outlines the progress made since December of last year. In keeping with the principle of nothing without us, and as described in the report, the House continued to listen to feedback from people with disability and other key stakeholders to improve its plan and initiative. The major achievement and important step that the House completed this year are as follows. L'amélioration importante et
the significant and continuing improvement in web accessibility, several rapid improvements in buildings on the Hill, including the installation of a new universally accessible bathroom in the Confederation Building, launching a new training for members and their staff, as well as administration managers, to help give them the necessary tools to support members with disabilities and their teams, and developing a new directive for more accessible procurement of products and services. And 2024's interim report is the last day of the current accessibility plan. A new plan for 2026 to 2028 will be developed and submitted to the board for approval by the end of 2025, pursuant to the requirements of the Accessible Canada Act.
And I welcome any question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions or comments?
Madame de Bellefeuille.
Oui, merci beaucoup pour la présentation.
Thank you for the presentation. I was curious, and perhaps I didn't do all of my homework. In the policy, do we talk about people who have temporary disabilities? Can you be temporarily disabled? And how do MPs or their staffs express their needs for support to the administration if they're going through this situation? Thank you for the question. Yes, Madame de Bellefeuille. temporary disabilities are considered fully as disabilities, so the same accommodations apply and the attention should be similar. So, if I may, Chair, is this cross-cutting? Does this apply to all services? Are all areas as concerned with listening to the needs of MPs or their staffs who are experiencing temporary disabilities? Chair, this ought to be the case. That is the intention of the House Accessibility Plan. But we're in a consciousness-raising process, and we want to implement efficient measures to meet the needs of our clientele, of the MPs. So feedback is very important to us, and the Secretariat plays a role, too, to take this feedback and ensure that it is understood in all areas. This is something that we do every day. We are grateful when we receive feedback from our clients, and we're looking for that feedback. Last question, Chair, if I may. What is the entrance? I'm a whip. What's the entrance if you have any special request to support a member with a temporary disability? Is it HR? Like, which department does one turn to be able to be supported during this time of need for adaptation? The Accessibility Secretariat, we're a small team, but we have allies in all departments, so we'd be happy to coordinate this for you. No issue for us. So you're the gateway? Yes. And are your coordinates easily found? Yes, there's an accessibility page which includes an email. It's at parle.ca. We have a phone number as well. Excellent. Thank you very much. Ms. Fortier and then Mr. Julian. Thank you very much, and thank you for your interim report. I'm always interested in hearing how we can improve. I saw that in the consultation exercise that you consulted Stephanie Cadieux. I think that she's an excellent example of a resource and how we could improve. Did she share any recommendations with you? Are you able to share with us how she perceives this exercise and whether she had any recommendations to make or suggestions to make? Because again, I've worked with her a lot in other areas, and I think that she has a vision and a way of finding ways to improve. So, can you answer that? Yes, thank you for the question. We've worked with her office and with her this year. She came to us and gave a talk to MPs and the whole parliamentary community. Positive comments from, again, Cadieux can be read in her report as well. Training is important, compulsory training, which we have, of which we have implemented 2 sessions. She talked about having us improve the way in which we communicate and tell visitors about our accessibility tools. We have the tools, but they're not always well publicized. So this is something that we did after a conversation with her office. We clarified we had a website now dedicated to the topic, the various accommodation tools. For example, we provide T-coils and we have direct transcription in certain seats. We have mobile devices for people who need hearing assistance. These tools were not necessarily, well, people didn't know about them. So we worked with the corporate communications team to ensure that members were aware of these, and because members invite guests, and we also had a webpage on this subject. But we continue to work with Ms. Cadieux. It's an advantage to us because she's a former MP herself, and so she understands the context in which we work. So we have a very nice working relationship. Mr. Julian. Thank you for your work. I'd like to get back to the question of consultations. So there's a lot of diversity in the disabled community in Canada. I've worked in this area, providing services to deaf and hard of hearing individuals before coming here. As an elected official, we see that people can have visual, hearing, physical disabilities, all kinds. The House consulted Stephanie Cadieux. But I would like to see a broader consultation with the various diverse groups in Canada, because with our Centre Block project, the House really has an opportunity to make Parliament as accessible as possible. I think that this would call for broad consultation with all of these groups. Are any other consultations planned? Or are there any others that have taken place but aren't mentioned here? Thank you for the question. Mr. Julian, I agree with you, and this is very important. In terms of Centre Block, and together with our partner, Public Works, we have an advisory committee representing all the major organizations representing people with disabilities, Rick Hansen, for example, the Canadian Association for the Deaf. This advisory committee, together with our partners, has often come to present various options, and we'll look for feedback, or we present them with the options and look for feedback. We have a good consultation process. In the House, we consulted extensively when the plan was first launched. We don't want to impede on the time of parliamentarians. People have been highly solicited since the plan was implemented, but I am willing to have more specific individual consultations on various topics. So I'll take your suggestion, especially when we have to prepare a new plan. We'll go on a consultation blitz next year. Thank you, colleagues. No? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Lepellier, for your presentation. I appreciate the efforts being made to make Parliament even more accessible to all Canadians. Which brings us to item 7. I was about to say the last item, but no, I can't skip ahead of myself. So I'd like to invite Mr. Dicker to report to us. Colleagues, you may recall that this item was raised last week at our last meeting at the Board of Internal Economy, and we had promised that we would get back to it so that we could have a more fulsome conversation on the subject. Mr. Dicker. Thank you, Chair.
Class May, we are here to inform the Board of the state of the constituency telephony service pilot and to seek approval to maintain it until the next election, to fully validate the finalized new solution, and continue to develop the approaches to complete the nationwide service replacement post-election. Depuis la mise sur pied du projet pilote,
since the implementation of the pilot, we have seen that MPs are very engaged and responsive. 32 members have been invited and selected, of whom 18 chose the House of Commons managed solution and 14 chose the MP managed solution. The consultation and deployment preparation phases have continued since MPs returned to Parliament in the fall. 13 transformations are complete, of which 11 involved the House-managed implementation, and 2 involved MP-managed solutions.
Member and pilot feedback. Members consulted indicated a strong desire to have the House of Commons managed telecommunication service and benefit from the functional and user experience improvements. Specifically related to the HOC managed telephony offering, voicemail to email management is reported as a significant benefit for inbound constituent case management. The mainline call management approach, which allows staff to opt in and opt out of receiving mainline calls based on their working hours and other commitments, is also deemed to be of high value. The portability of the solution, where calls aren't anchored to an office desk phone, has been identified as valuable. For the MP-managed telephony, some pilot members have encountered challenges in reaching their service provider. Largely, the issue raised are in the search for a provider and appropriate telephony service selection and the transformation action required to move to the new approach. Office have indicated that it is very involved process on their part. In both options, the feedback collected indicates a strong preference for wireless headsets to simplify mobility within the office, suggesting that wireless options should be considered as possible purchasable MOB standard moving forward. Members have also expressed the need for a desk phone for front desk and constituent use on the grounds of hygienic reasons and practicality. The House administration has adjusted the offering to include a Microsoft Teams desk phone per constituency office to address this use case. La transformation du système de téléphonie.
Transforming from the current telephony system to a new one requires major change management. Transferring control, ownership, and administrative management of phone numbers of constituency offices to new service providers is cumbersome. There are delays on the administrative side, delays and problems with coordinating and integrating the new system. This has sometimes led to extended wait times or downtimes. Processing times lasted from a few days to a few weeks, based on the complexity and the kind of problems encountered. Worth noting is that this was a one-time problem caused by the transition. Once the House administration will have broadly deployed the service, the problem will be resolved. Procurement for new MPs post-election, as well as configuration changes, will be done quickly.
Efficient rollout of the services post-election for all new members, it is recommended to lead with the standardized HOC-managed telecommunication approach. This will provide members with comprehensive support, consistency in service quality, and ease of implementation. Post-election, new members will be the priority, addressing those who occupy the previous member's office or to establish themselves in a new constituency office space. Returning members that need to move their constituency office due to electoral boundary readjustment will need to be addressed based on their new lease and occupancy dates. Finally, returning members who are maintaining their existing constituency office will see their transition happen in the last phase. While the HOC-managed telecommunication approach deployment is the recommended option, members can opt out and seek an MP-managed telephony solution if they prefer to handle the deployment themselves. It should be noted that the member-managed model will be the responsibility of the member's office. This will require additional time and resources for coordination with service providers, equipment setup, and troubleshooting. Il est donc recommandé que le Bureau approuve les recommandations.
We therefore recommend that the BOIE approve the following recommendations. Limit participation of new MPs and focus on deployments already underway. Maintain the pilot project for stability and information gathering purposes. Prepare broad deployments in the technology lifecycle program for riding offices after the elections. Adopt the approach that is House managed and offer MP managed deployment as an optional option for MPs who wish to manage their deployment independently.
Answer questions or concerns.
Très bien. Merci, Monsieur Dicker.
Thank you, Mr. Dicker. Any questions or comments? Mr. Julian. Thank you. We've already obtained many answers to the questions that I was going to ask, so I'll limit myself to the recommendations. When you talk about the recommendation to implement and emphasize the deployments already underway, what are the next phases? If we have MPs who are satisfied, and from what I've understood, that's the case, is the idea that after the next elections, the next BOIE will deal with these issues? In other words, approving a plan to implement the deployment for all MPs? Or is the idea to continue to assess the pilot and perhaps maybe in a year come back to the BOIE? Or does the House administration have whatever it needs to implement the deployment regardless? I'm just trying to understand what the next steps are. Because in a few months, there'll be an election, we know that. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Julian, when we appeared last spring, we asked for 12 months, which would bring us, we're right now about 6 months after that, 6 months post-launch. There were some delays because of the summer period. We remain confident that were an election to occur in the spring or next fall, depending on circumstances, we'll be prepared to deploy across the board, beginning, as I already mentioned, with MPs who are new or involved with a move, or people beginning in a current office. Thank you. Ms. de Bellefeuille. Thank you, Chair. I agree with all of your recommendations. I do have 2 quick questions. I am fortunate enough to be part of the pilot project, and I have noted that we're delighted with this new way of using the telephone system. It's more ergonomic. My team finds it to be a much more adapted tool for the kind of work that they do. We are using the house managed system, and that's with Microsoft Teams IP, I think. And I have to say that during a pilot project, there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of feedback, and I find that your team is very responsive and very reactive, and they find solutions to problems so that when the project will really be implemented across the board, it's going to be nearly perfect. But my question is this. If all offices opt for Microsoft Teams IP technology, what happens if there's a power failure? Will our citizens still be able to access the phone services? That's a concern that I have. Thank you, Madame de Bellefeuille. That's an excellent question. There are 2 aspects to ensure a seamless service for your constituents. Last week, I made a presentation on the renewal of writing offices and their writing office technology. We introduced certain redundancy in the networking equipment. What do you mean by redundancy? Well, that means that if there's a power failure, particularly if we're talking, well, I'll talk about 2 different scenarios. One is a power failure. The IP Teams technology can be transferred to a cell line. So there's no loss even if there's no power at the writing office. As long as the employee has a cell phone, it's possible to receive the calls and they can be directly transferred from the MP's main line. If we're talking about the internet being down, internet is essential in this new technology. So there are 2 components. 1, the phone, and 2, the new internet communication technology for offices will include some redundant internet in some offices. So in other words, cell service will be used if there is some sort of breakdown involving the internet provider. We have not anticipated using this because this is quite costly. We haven't anticipated using it in all riding offices. So we talked about 30%, for example, rural areas where there's a higher risk of having the internet service go down. So in our strategic vision, we could perhaps decide that not 30%, but maybe 50% would need this because there's a spending on this other technology to avoid having any services be interrupted due to a power failure or a network failure. So I'll keep that in mind if I'm part of the committee. The technology being proposed works when it works. When there's power, when you've got internet, when you've got the support. So that's all part of your plan. What I like about your project, one of the main irritants when you're a new MP, is that even if you have a physical office, it takes quite some time before you can actually get a phone and before having your name listed on the fax. We are impatient to get working. I think what you're proposing is going to avoid that waiting time for future newly elected MPs, and citizens will be able to access their numbers. But what numbers? Is it going to be the riding office number or the cell number? How are you going to organize it? Excellent question, Chair. One major irritant for new MPs is the inability to have access for the first 3 weeks to have a riding office phone. We have constituents that want to call us, and they can't because there's a time period during which the former MP has access to the offices. So what we're going to do this time is introduce new phone numbers for the main line, which will mean that starting on day one, you'll be able to answer the phone. And after 21 days, the calls will be forwarded. So existing number will be forwarded. So the new phone number will be on the business cards, and the MP won't have to share the cell number there because that's a security problem for MPs. Well, that's good news. Thank you very much. It's our Christmas gift. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Dicker. I presume that the recommendations are approved. Thank you. And congratulations. You're untangling a knot that has been in existence for far too long. Colleagues, there's one item left on our agenda. I've included it in the agenda. You received documents from PSPC. I must tell you that I'm not fully comfortable, and allow me to explain. We received the documents since our last meeting, and in terms of governance, the LTVP group, or the committee working on renovations in Centre Block, hasn't had an opportunity, or not all the members haven't had an opportunity to read the document and make their recommendations to the board. So I'm a little uncomfortable with this because the idea was that we created the committee to do the assessing and make recommendations to us, but they were not in a position to do it this week. Secondly, the chair of that working committee is not available. He had to take the chair. So there are people from the department who are here and who could answer questions if you have any, but my recommendation would be to consider this after the committee has had an opportunity to assess this and make their recommendations. If you want to ask questions on issues of concern to you, if you have had the time to read the document people are here from PSPC or from the department to answer our questions. Ms. de Bellefeuille. Well, we set up governance process. We should respect it. I also haven't had an opportunity to read this. I received the documents somewhat late. I do have a lot of questions. I saw the recommendations, and some of the recommendations will probably lead to all kinds of healthy discussions amongst us. So I agree with you that this should be deferred to our next meeting. Is everybody in agreement with this suggestion? In that case, my apologies to people from the department who have come here. Thank you for this, but we must respect our governance system that we set up to evaluate these matters. If there are no other issues that colleagues wish to raise.
Happy holidays. Thank you very much for your work over the last year in 2024. Et puis j'aimerais aussi prendre le temps pour remercier.
I'd also like to take the time to thank the House of Commons administration, all the women and men who have worked so hard to support us over this last year. I appreciate your work very much to make the MPs' work go smoothly and respect their privileges. So thank you very much. You do a terrific job. And I wish you all very happy holidays, and we'll see you again in the new year. Thank you very much. And the interpreters. And the interpreters, of course. Isabel, Cecile, and I've forgotten the name of the third person. Sharon. Sharon. But I'd like to congratulate everybody for their work and thank all of your colleagues who support us at the BOIE. Thank you very much and happy holidays.
Meeting adjourned.